Hi, you're with Jason at True Vintage RC. We are on to the second instalment of the Kyosho Ultima build. So we've got a 1986 model car and we've got a 2019 model re-release car. And in the last video, you would have seen me pull down an original 1986 Ultima, and I also have this new in box re-release 2019 Kyosho Ultima kit. And today, what I wanted to do is, well, I'm going to lift the lid on the box first of all, and we're going to have a quick look at what it looks like when you open up the kit box from brand new. So here we are into some fine inserts. There's the body there, and we've got a bunch of parts in boxes here. And look, I'm not going to go overboard. I don't want to open up every last thing and talk about how amazing the packaging is. Not my thing. Okay, if it's your thing, it's just not my thing. There's the build manual. And I was like, what is going on with these tyres? What are they doing in lunch wrap? Guys, if that's not meant to be like that, tell me, because I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so yeah, some really nice parts. They actually packaged it out pretty nicely. I've got to say, good on Kyosho for putting some effort into making the kit look nice when you open it. But I'm just going to get straight into it. Yeah, I'm just going to tear into things. We're into the opening of the first bag here. We've got the manual open on the first page, laying out the parts for the build ahead. So the concept always was to build both cars at the same time, in the same order that would come out of the re-release manual. So this is what I've done, and the important thing for me to do also was to make some comparisons of the parts from the 2019 re-release and the original 1986 model. So there are lots of differences, and kudos to Kyosho because they've just taken the old design and they've really gone to town with it, and they've been faithful to the aesthetics and to the look of the car for the most part, but they have made some really good and significant changes along the way. Some people might be sad to know, but not all parts are transferable between the two cars. You can buy complete gearboxes, I'm sure, to bolt to old cars, but yeah, you can see there are some differences. And like, for example, you just can't go sticking the old internals of the transmission into a new transmission case. It's just not going to work, I'm afraid. But yeah, they've made some really great changes. They've addressed some weaknesses in the car, and right out of the box, they've made a far better car than what the original ever was, in my opinion. But hey, we're many years down the track from that original design. But yeah, like, I guess it was always going to have to happen. If they're going to reissue the car, then it wasn't going to be completely as it was back in 1986. But point to note here: do not forget that shim inside of that gearbox. Now, I did that with my re-release Optima when I built it, and couldn't for the life of me figure out why it was slipping. But yep, that was the issue. And yeah, when you build these cars, you don't really want to have to pull them down for something silly like that. It's another point of note. It's really good to put a dab of grease on that bevel gear before it goes together. Just stops it falling apart as you're sort of moving around and assembling it. And look, I'm not a fan of metal bushes, and the original Ultima came with these metal bushes. And on the diff, they had these two-part metal bushes, and you know, in my opinion, just don't compare to bearings, I'm afraid. So this car isn't being super modified, but I am ball racing it along the way, and just look, if I can address any little issues or reliability concerns, I will. But at this point, everything's just going back together as it would have in the original 1986 manual. So yeah, and please, viewers, if you do not use thread lock on your screws, grub screws, whatever, yeah, go get yourself some from even from the local hardware will have it, or your local hobby shop. But yeah, I thread lock everything. Well, all metal threads. You know, if it's not a nylon locking nut, then yeah, everything gets thread locked, and it makes the car so much more reliable. Yeah. Anyway, so I really do actually like the gear diffs on these cars. They've kind of thought of everything for such an old design, but they've got an O-ring seal, and you put some grease on it, and actually seals up the the gear diffs so you can pack them full of grease. They even come with a gasket, so Yep, and you get these tiny little pins, and they are so hard to get in place. So you're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers or tweezers to get them in there. And yeah, back to the bushings again. No thanks, you can have them. So yeah, out with the bushings, in with the bearings. Just makes the car just run so much freer, and yeah, it just does everything it's supposed to do. Yeah, greasing up the original internals here for the 86 model bevel gears that go into the gear diff. And yeah, there's a washer that goes on after the bearing and before that drive cup. And yeah, again, on with the thread lock, you can't over, well, maybe you can overdo it, but yeah, you can never really underdo it. Anyhow, it's going together, and I would like this car to stay together, so that's why I use a lot of thread lock on all the metal screws. Anyway, yeah, filling up the grease. Here's the new diff now. Yeah, it's all together. I've cut out a lot of the fluff, so I'm just trying to make this as watchable as possible. And again, thread lock on these little cap head screws that actually hold the 2019 geared diff together. Again, can't go wrong. More thread lock, thread lock, thread lock, thread lock. Yeah, people are going to call me the thread lock king because I'm showing everyone how to put thread lock on a thread. But anyway, I'm hoping I'm ramming it home to people who don't use it. Anyway, so yeah, diffs going together. This should be one of the last screws. Then I'll just go around and I'll torque up each of the screws opposing side one at a time. I don't over tighten. I just like to just snip it up, and sometimes even if I've done over tighten, I even back it off just a fraction, just to give it that bit of space. Anyhow, here's the other section of the 86 diff going together. So I'm using the last of the grease that came with the 2019 car, and here we go. Yeah, nothing exciting here, but anyway, grease is going in, and you've got four self-taping screws that actually go in and actually hold that diff together. Bearings go on to the reissue diff, and there's the original diff. So yeah, they're very different. There's just nothing the same about those diffs. And the re-release is just so much better. And so here is the 86 diff, and it's going into its proper transmission there, spinning nice and freely, everything's good. But just as an exercise, I wanted to show people that, you can't just go sticking the old diff into the new transmission housing. It just doesn't fit. The OD of the bearing is too small, and it's as far as I went with it. I wasn't going to bother going any further with it. But yeah, so there's the new diff going into the new transmission housing, all looking sweet. But then, of course, I thought, well, let's just really drive the point home. So I've taken the new diff and tried to stick it in the old transmission. It just won't fit, of course, because the bearing's just too big to go in there. Anyhow, so that's that done. And back to the instruction manual. And kudos to Kyosho, because they did include a full set of bearings with this car. And that's fantastic, because I'm sure they're doing it in all their re-releases. Now we're looking at popping the bearing in up on where the lay shaft is, and you got this little plastic piece that snaps in place here. It must just hold that bearing on the inside there, stop it from jumping around. And it does a really good job, because the old one used to be held on the outside, and I didn't like it. But yeah, they've obviously looked at that, so they use this slipper lay shaft temporarily to go in there, and you've got a collar that actually spaces this top gear out. So gone is the old plastic or alloy final pinion gear, and in goes this new setup. And yeah, look, it just is so cool. Thank you, Kyosho. You finally built a much more reliable transmission. And look, I don't know how far people have gone with these with modern brushless systems, but I'm sure they can take a lot more of a hiding what the old ones would have. So yeah, here we go. Of course, the reissue uses all hex screws, which is just fantastic, because I got to say, I don't in any way like the old Phillips head drive, which we're just about to use here shortly. So yeah, here's the Ultima uses a plastic final pinion gear The Optima series ran an alloy one, and it was just so soft it was like it was made of cheese. Anywho, starting to look at putting together the 86 transmission, and there's the fully rebuilt diff ready to go, and these are the factory included bushings that I just do not want to use. So in goes some bearings. I just want the transmission to be nice and free, and to not be labouring under all that extra drag of having bushes and what have you. So anyway, there's the top shaft, and on goes the final pinion gear, and in goes the diff, and I'm just about to close up the gearbox casing, and one screw just goes down the bottom there and kind of holds it all together just while you are building the transmission. So yeah, super free. I've got to give it that. It's very nice and free. The 32 pitch gears obviously help it in that regard, but anyway, back to the 2019 transmission, and this is the 2019 motor plate, and there's the standoff, and thankfully Kyosho has decided to release this car with the metal motor guard, which to me looks exactly the same as a option house that came out back in the day, and they were just super expensive. They were gold anodized. And another cool thing Kyosho have done is they've incorporated these wing mounts that actually bolt into the gearbox housing as part of the assembly, and I've put on the tallest ones here because I just wanted to see what it'd be like with the tallest ones. There is an option to go with a shorter one as well that come with a kit, but I'm just going to go with a long one for now and see how this goes together. So that's the transmission getting screwed together, and put Loctite on all the ends of the threads, of course, so that they can bite into the motor plate on the receiving side of holding those gearboxes together. And just to note, I actually did check the two motor plates, and they are almost identical. And here we are now onto the slipper assembly, and thank you Kyosho again for doing something really cool. And look, I don't know how super efficient this slipper is. I know it's very basic, but they did a really good job of incorporating this into the original gearbox design, and yeah, thank you for doing that. I really like that Kyosho put these in their Ultimas and their Optimas now. Be very careful with that space there. It needs to be in the right direction. I'm sure you can make a mistake with that and bind up in the gearbox housing anyway. So yeah, the gearbox is going together, and we're back to the 32 pitch spur gear for the 86 car. And yeah, I had a bushing, but no, I'm very careful about how I space this spur gear out here on this post here. So I've actually got a couple of really small shims. I couldn't tell you how thick they were, just found them on my pit box. But yeah, on goes a flange bearing on the inside and a flange bearing on the outside. And I did try it with the original O-ring that was used in the kit back in the day, and by the time I actually had the pin in there, it was just binding up, and I'm like, no, I want it to be much freer. So off goes the O-ring and a couple of small washers, and there you are, there's the detail. And I'm just going to pop the gear cover on, and yep, super free. Anyhow, on to the tie rods now, and again, that's something that Kyosho has done with the reissue, is they've given you at least adjustable tie rods, whereas in the original Ultima you had these moulded one-piece jobbies that, God, I don't know why they even bothered, but anyway, Kyosho has addressed that. And now we're on to the rear bulkheads, and we've got the, I'm going to show you some differences in these, and there are a few differences, but they still will go from one car to the other, and they will accept each other's shock towers from the opposite vehicle. So if you wanted to do that, you could. I didn't initially like the plastic ones. When I first saw the photos, I was like, oh God, Kyosho, what have you done? But you know what, they look really tough, and I'm sure they can take a beating, and aluminium towers do bend, there's no argument there, but you know what, I actually like it, so I'm not against it at all. And what I also did note is that obviously we're going to be using different shocks, and there's a significant difference in that shock height. So in at an assumption, I would say that they've gone with like the Turbo Ultima shock height or the Ultima Pro. So yeah, I'm just going along here now, and I'm just double checking some dimensions, and I wanted to see what all the true changes were. And no offense to anyone who's created YouTube videos on Ultimas, but I wanted to know precisely, you know, some of the important details. So I've gone along and measured many things, and I hope some of these measurements help people as they make decisions with how they're setting up their cars, or if they wanted to incorporate some of the reissue parts on, you know, some of the earlier cars. But yeah, here we are. So we're now up to the rear suspension arms, and yeah, they've actually made them a little bit less wide in this regard. So they've got some spaces, which means you can space the arm forward or rearwards, and tune the car a little bit more. So I also noted back there before, there was some initial toe set in on the 86 model car, so there was a millimetre of difference between front and rear, so it would have given a millimetre of toe in overall. But yeah, in the reissue, they've actually got hubs, which you will see in the next video, which have inserts which you can adjust how much rear toe you actually have, which is, again, just another cool feature that Kyosho have done. They did it on the re-release Optima series, and they've obviously done it on the Ultima as well. Here I am just, I've sped up the video, and I'm just basically putting these components together, and yeah, just wanted to see how they all flowed, and it's all being assembled, ready to go onto the chassis. Gearbox is being bolted in, and but in the next video, it's going to be a little bit less going through packages and boxes or talking about other things. I want to get onto the actual completion of the build. So here I've actually bolted the two chassis together, and I wanted to make some determinations here on some of the changes that have been made. So you'll see there that the front of the chassis has more of a cutout. It's actually stepped back more, so it looks like the steering bell clamps will have more room to maybe swing left and right outside of the chassis. So yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited to get this car together and just see the performance differences, and that will be in a video later on. But yeah, also double checking here for battery openings. I know people, well, we don't just have sub-C battery packs like that were around back in the 80s, but we've got lipos now, and I guess there might be some different tolerances. So I've gone to the trouble here of actually measuring the openings for the lipos, and I've also measured the thickness of the chassis. So there is a 0.5mm thickness difference between the old one and the new. But anyway, that's about it for today. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it here, and thank you very much for watching. Please come back and watch the final video. I'm going to get it together in the next few days, and please drop us a comment, leave us a like, and why not subscribe?